Hello guys, welcome to another video, and in this one I wanted to do a bit of discussion on a brand new item coming to the game in Path of Exile 2's 0.5 update, that is the Olroth's Legacy Rune. And here is the item right here. It says destroy a unique item, extract one of its unique modifiers, and turn it into a socketable rune. Now in the Q&A with Mark and Jonathan we actually had a little bit of extra information here.
It's called Olroth's Legacy. And it's a rune that you can place in Ezomyte and Kalguuran Uniques to destroy the unique, and it takes one of the mods off of it and creates a unique rune.
What?
With a slightly modified value sometimes, because obviously. And then you can put that in the same item class of a different
I don't even know about this
item.
system.
And this would suggest that the modifiers in some cases are going to be toned down a little bit to kind of make way for the fact that you're no longer using the unique. You can use a much better item in its place, but you do still have to socket that rune into an item of the same class. So for example, if you got it from a two-handed mace, it needs to go back into a two-handed mace. But even regardless of that, there are some really strong modifiers to be taken, and we didn't really think the list was that big, but we have this item filter information that's come out, and there is a huge amount of uniques that you can actually use this rune on. A lot of interesting ones in here, lots and lots of uniques where they're kind of borderline useful, but you just can't really use them because their basic stats are just not being very good. So in this video I'm going to go over some of the most interesting ones from this list and talk about how they're going to influence builds in 0.5. What we don't know is exactly how this rune is going to work on an item. Does it only choose a specific modifier that's kind of predefined, or does it choose a random modifier? The text on the item would suggest that it just chooses a modifier at random and then it just creates a, for example, you use it on Bramblejack and you get one of the Bramblejack modifiers and it just creates a Legacy of Bramblejack rune. And that is going to be a little bit confusing because, for example, you're going to have several Legacy of Bramblejack runes that all have different modifiers. But regardless, we'll discuss that in this video with some of the items having several modifiers that you may want to use. So let's get straight into it, beginning with the Blackbraid body armor. This one, pretty much unusable because of the low base armor. We did see that the rune forging bench will be able to increase the armor on this one up to about 400, but even at 400 it is a little bit too low, I think, for a body armor there in the end game. And there's this huge amount of armor applying to elemental damage. If this provides, maybe 30% or 40% of what it does right here, then that's going to be a really good rune to socket into your body armor, and you're going to be able to use that in a much better crafted body armor. Next up we have Irongrasp. This one's really interesting considering we've got a bunch of new strength stacking stuff coming into the game in this patch. We have the new Brutus Lead Sprinkler one-handed mace, and we also have Facebreaker. Both of those are just kind of pure strength stacking builds for maces. And you get the Iron Grip Keystone here and the Iron Will Keystone. As far as I'm aware, these are the only places you can get these keystones in Path of Exile 2. Iron Grip grants you a bit of increased projectile attack damage there per 2 strength. And you also get the 1% increased spell damage per 2 strength from Iron Will. You can kind of double these up if you use a projectile attack skill, for example, Molten Blast. And the Brutus Lead Sprinkler also has a triggered ability, which is also a projectile attack damage skill, so that combos very nicely with this. If you're able to get one of these keystones, that's going to be really strong on its own. Perhaps it's going to be like a toned down version of both of them together in a rune form. That is still going to be very powerful because this body armor is terrible other than those keystones, and then you can use that in a very good crafted body armor. Next up is the Chernobog's Pillar Shield, which has gain 1% of damage as fire damage per 1% chance to block. This is a really good modifier. The shield itself isn't actually that bad because you have, some pretty good stats here. Fire resistance, chaos resistance, stun threshold, these are all pretty useful modifiers. But you would still want a stronger crafted shield if you could get it, if you could also maintain this modifier. Again, probably won't be the full efficacy there. You might get 1% of damage per 2% chance to block, but that is still going to be a nice modifier to grab. Able to kind of dip into your defenses a little bit and gain some damage from that. Next up there is the Alkem Eira shield, which has damage blocked is recouped as mana. Now I actually discussed some block recoup tech that you can use in the last patch, and that is because they removed a bug that had been in the game since the early access launch where block didn't count as prevented damage, which it now does. So if you kind of stack up the whole prevented damage thing with block and then you also use this, you can maybe do kind of hybrid approach to taking damage where you get some damage taken from mana before life. That's going to be really strong. Once again, I don't think this is going to be full efficacy. It'll probably be something like 50% of damage blocked is recouped as mana, but that's still a very powerful rune to make use of. Then we have Trenchtimbre, which is a one-handed mace. This has increases and reductions to minion attack speed also affect you. There's definitely some abuse cases there where you can kind of like invest into minion attack speed to get quite a bit of extra attack speed for attack builds. Notably though, this is a one-handed mace, so you're going to have to be using a one-handed mace in your build in the kind of endgame there to be able to make use of this rune and socket it into that item. So there are a few good one-handed maces of things like the Olrovasara, for example, which is doing a lot of lightning damage. There's also Brutus Lead Sprinkler, which is that new strength attacking mace in this patch. Both of those are one-handed maces. So there's definitely something you could do there where you kind of stack up a bunch of minion attack speed to kind of bypass the much lower amount of attack speed you can get just generally for attack builds. Next up there's Mjolnir. Was surprised to see this one in there, and I'm not sure exactly what's going to come from this item, because you could say that we're going to be able to get our hands on level of lightning skills, which would be quite interesting. I'm not sure how useful that would be, considering this is, again, a one-handed mace. But is it possible that you'll be able to obtain the Thunder God's Wrath ability from this? I don't think that's going to be a thing, because they probably want to keep the skills tied to the weapons themselves and the items, right? Because that's kind of the whole design of a unique. But perhaps that is going to be a thing. The other modifiers here don't really make too much sense. Like, this would be ridiculous if you could take this amount of increased physical damage. So I'm not really sure if that's going to be a thing. Once again, it goes back to that question of, will we be able to take several modifiers off the items, or is there just a predetermined one modifier that comes from these? Then there's Hoghunt. This one is really interesting because this is a two-handed mace, and this is plus 15% to critical hit chance. So that is a local critical hit chance modifier. This weapon itself usually has 20% crit chance once you actually factor in this crit chance on the weapon. And that is absolutely absurd. So even if this is a third of that, right, if you're able to add 5% flat base crit to your two-handed mace, that is going to be really, really powerful. This is definitely one to look out for in terms of mace builds. Next we have the Hrimnor's Hymn there, which has this slam skills you use yourself cause an additional aftershock. Now, this modifier does not stack with other chance to cause aftershock modifiers, because the way how this works is it basically sets your chance to cause an additional aftershock to 100% in the tooltip, and any extra chance you get stacks on top of that and does not provide any extra chance beyond the first to actually cause an aftershock. But I don't think this as a rune will be exactly as that reads. I think it'll probably end up being, 20 or 30% chance to cause an extra aftershock, at which point you will be able to use that alongside other chance-based modifiers. And once again, this is a two-handed mace, so that's going to be very useful in the endgame. You can use it with things like Giant's Blood Mace with a shield. Then we have Brain Rattler. All damage with this weapon causes electrocution build-up. Electrocution is a very strong debuff that basically stuns an enemy for 5 seconds. It's not considered to be a stun, but it is an elemental ailment that causes a stun-like effect, prevents the target from doing any actions, and it lasts for 5 seconds. So that is very, very powerful, especially when you consider that you can kind of combine this on a much better mace. You can actually deal a lot of damage. You're going to be getting heavy stun build-up as well, alongside electrocution, which is very strong defensively. Next up, we have Adonia's Ego there, and I wanted to mention this one because, again, I'm not really sure which of these modifiers you're going to be able to take from this. Perhaps it will be the maximum power charges thing there, but again, will we see a thing where you can kind of take skills from items? I'm not convinced, but Pinnacle of Power would be interesting. There's also Dusk Vigil there. I wanted to point this one out because this is kind of in the same vein there. How exactly is this going to work as a rune? Is it just going to be this, extra damage gained as fire, which would be kind of more generic, and, you place that in your staff? But could it be this Trigger Ember Fusillade skill on casting a spell? You get the skill here, which is actually being triggered, and perhaps that's going to be a thing that you can actually take from this item and place into a different staff. And there's also Quill Rain there. A couple of ridiculous mods on here. The increased attack speed, increased arrow speed. You do have the 40% less attack damage. And the crazy thing about this one is that the increased attack speed is, of course, a local attack speed modifier. And how exactly is that going to work? Even if this ends up being 30% of this modifier and it's a 30% local attack speed for the socketed bow, that is still extremely good. It probably will come with the downside of the less attack damage, not at this value, but at a lower value. Next up, we have Amor Mandragora. This is a unique talisman, and I actually used this in the last patch, where I had it in my weapon swap, and I was making use of Druidic Prowess, which is a buff that grants you increased skill speed, stacks up to 3 times, and you can have 30% increased skill speed all of the time with that tech. And I assume that this is the modifier that's going to be taken from this unique talisman. So being able to kind of do that tech without the weapon swap, and then actually having another weapon swap option for different things like curses and stuff like that is going to be very powerful. Having 30% increased skill speed all the time is really good. Next up we have Svalinn. We already knew that this item was going to be in this list because it's a Kalguuran Unique, of course, and this item is getting buffed in the patch. It's going to have some runic ward baseline. But once again, what are we going to take from this item? Is it going to be the cast on block? That would be really interesting. Perhaps it will be some kind of lucky block chance where it's like partial lucky block with a particular prerequisite. Or maybe it will be lucky block with a higher percentage of damage taken from blocked hits. This one I think is really hard for them to balance because Svalinn is such a ridiculous shield option just for the lucky block. So that'll be interesting to see how that one comes out. And there's the Keeper of the Arc helmet there. Of course, this is in the list. This is also a Kalguuran Unique. And this has take 40% less damage from hits and 40% less damage over time. And that alternates every 5 seconds. So you get 5 seconds of each just consecutively. This is just really strong. Like, this helmet is not good because it's very difficult to make use of this helmet against all of the other competing options. If this is even 15% less damage from hits and damage over time consecutively, this is going to be a really good rune that you can then socket into a much better helmet. So that is something to look out for there. That's a strong one. Then there's Olrovasara, which is a one-handed mace. This one has this modifier right here, which basically grants added maximum lightning damage when you hit targets based on their enemy power. So when you're hitting like a boss or something like that, you can ramp this very, very quickly. But the damage stays for a long time, so you're able to pretty easily reach max damage, even in mapping and things like that, and actually keep it. And this one also has a really high attack speed modifiers. So if you can take multiple modifiers from different items, perhaps the attack speed here will be quite strong. Do keep in mind this is a one-handed mace again, so you need to make use of a one-handed mace. Next up we have Crown of Thorns, which has the Pain Attunement Keystones. This is going to be a way to actually get this keystone without having to use this helmet and without having to pass through it on the tree. Will it be a toned down version? I think the interesting thing there when discussing like the whole idea of a toned down version of keystones is the ability to stack them then with the actual keystone and kind of making your way to them on the tree. And maybe even builds were already there on the tree, so that's kind of a buff to those builds indirectly if they can do that as well. The same can be said for the Irongrasp body armor that we talked about earlier. If this is like a toned down version of these two combined into one rune that you can then stack with this body armor, for example, you can, destroy the body armor and then place the rune of this body armor in the same body armor again, and you're kind of doing the whole strength stacking thing, you're getting even more out of it. I'm not sure that that's what they're going to go for, so perhaps they'll just be one keystone, you're only going to be able to get one of these. And the same can probably be said there for Crown of Thorns. You probably will be able to get the Pain Attunement Keystone. If that's possible, that's going to be quite strong. You can access that keystone on builds that usually wouldn't travel there on the passive tree. And then there's the Deathblow gloves. I had to mention these because they have Cutting Strike built in, and that's just really strong. If you can just get Cutting Strike, that is pretty good on a pair of gloves. There's also Legionstride, which has base block chance. This is 10% base block chance, which is pretty nice. Allows you to scale block without having to scale things like a shield. This is going to be quite nice in combination with the bow that's being introduced in this patch. I think it's called Ironbound, which has some base block on it. So if you can take this off these boots and actually place it into a good pair of boots, even if it's 5% base block chance, that's going to be quite nice. And there's Trampletoe there, another pair of boots that has a ridiculous modifier. Deal 30% of overkill damage to enemies within 2 meters of the enemy killed. This one has been used time and time again on so many builds to kind of aid in clearing in PoE 2. And if you're even able to get, this modifier at 15%, it's going to be really quite good. Next up we have Brairpatch for the Thorns Enjoyers, plus 25% to Thorns critical strike chance. That's a strong modifier if you want to play Thorns. Again, kind of alleviates you from having to use these boots. There's also Wanderlust, which has your speed is unaffected by slows. This is an incredibly strong modifier. I really don't expect them to allow you to just take this modifier from these boots and use it in other boots. I think it will be like a toned down version of this. It will probably be, 50% reduced efficacy of slows on you or something like that, akin to the modifiers that you can get on the passive tree. And then you'll actually be able to invest into that a little bit more. But even at 50% or maybe even 40% or 30% of that value, that's still going to be a really strong rune. Starkonja's head was in there as well, and this one I think is already going to be a really popular unique this patch because it has the 15% of damage from hits taken from damageable companions' life before you, and there's going to be quite a few companion builds with the Spirit Walker coming into the game, so I think just being able to take one of these modifiers here, perhaps it'll be a toned down version of this that you can then use in an actual Starkonja's head, and that will allow you to take even more damage from the companion before you. Going to be quite strong defensively. And Elevore was also in this list. This is actually getting buffed in this patch. It will now gain 1 charm charge per second instead of the 0.5 listed here. And it also has 2 charm slots, or up to 2 charm slots with the roll there. So a way to gain charm charges passively, perhaps through a rune, is going to be quite strong if you want to take that one. And lastly, I will mention the Twisted Empyrean unique mace, which is coming into the game in this patch. This was in this list, of course. We knew that was going to be there because that's a Kalguuran Unique. And that one has the mana stacking added damage modifier, for example. That's quite good. But one of the crazy modifiers on this item is actually the flat cold modifier, which I believe is about double a current tier 1 cold damage modifier. So if you're able to take that and put it onto a mace, that is kind of ridiculous. There's also the 100% fire to cold conversion for mace skills, which might be quite useful if you want to do a particular build there. And one of the other items that was in that list is Ironbound, which has a really strong modifier. Arrows return if they have pierced a target which had fully broken armor. Now, that is technically double damage if you're able to fire an arrow through a target and then it comes back and hits them again. That is very, very powerful. I don't expect this will be a full power rune. It'll probably have a less damage for returning projectiles modifier locks on there so that you can't get this at full efficacy and put it into a different bow, because Ironbound is kind of balanced around the fact that you can't get that much flat damage on this item. But that is still going to be something quite powerful that you can pick up in the upcoming patch. And overall, there are some really interesting possibilities with this unique rune in the upcoming patch. I'm looking forward to it so much just to see exactly what this item is going to do. Is it going to choose a random modifier from those items, or is it predetermined? How do you guys read how exactly this is going to work? Let me know by commenting below. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.